The stagecoach kicked up dust across the barren New Mexico territory as it carried Emma Keller toward what she believed would be her new life. But the tear-stained letter clutched in her trembling hands told a different story. It was 1878, and at 22, Emma had just become that most pitiful of creatures a mail-order bride returned to sender, rejected sight unseen by her intended husband for being disappointingly plain, according to his hastily scrawled note. Emma pressed her forehead against the coach window, watching the endless landscape of sagebrush and distant mesas roll by. Her stomach churned with humiliation. 3 weeks of travel from Boston, only to be turned away at the church steps in Santa Fe with nothing but a refund for her passage and instructions to return east. The other passengers in the coach pretended not to notice her tears, though she caught their pitying glances. Last stop before nightfall, Redemption Creek. The driver called out as the stagecoach began to slow. Emma straightened her posture and dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. She hadn't planned to stop here, but the thought of continuing her journey of shame without rest was unbearable. Perhaps a night's sleep would restore some of her courage before facing the long journey back to Boston, back to nothing and no one. Redemption Creek appeared on the horizon, a dusty collection of wooden buildings straddling a thin stream that gave the town its name. It wasn't much, but after days of endless travel, even this modest settlement looked inviting. As the stagecoach rolled to a stop in front of the town's only hotel, Emma gathered her meager belongings. Her trunk contained the modest trousseau she'd prepared, simple dresses, a few books, and the quilts she'd sewn herself. Everything a new bride might need to start a humble life, all useless now. "You staying, miss?" the driver asked as he helped her down from the coach. "Just for the night," Emma replied softly, her voice still raw from crying. The driver nodded sympathetically. "Hotel's decent enough. Miss Porter runs a clean place." Emma thanked him and made her way to the hotel entrance, feeling the stares of locals following her progress. A woman traveling alone was always a curiosity in these frontier towns, and Emma knew her red-rimmed eyes and travel-worn appearance did nothing to discourage attention. The hotel lobby was mercifully cool after the afternoon heat. A stern-looking woman with gray-streaked hair stood behind the desk, assessing Emma with shrewd eyes. "Room for one," Emma said, placing coins on the counter. "Just for tonight." "Passing through?" the woman asked, pushing a register toward her. "Yes," Emma answered simply, signing her name in the book. She had no desire to explain her circumstances to a stranger. "Supper's at 6 in the dining room," the woman said, handing her a key. "Room 4, top of the stairs." Emma nodded gratefully and climbed the narrow staircase, each step a labor after days of travel. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed and a washstand. She set down her carpetbag and sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to fully feel the weight of her situation. She had left Boston with such hope. After her parents' deaths from influenza 2 years prior, the family home had been sold to pay debts, leaving Emma with few prospects. The advertisement seeking a bride of good character and practical disposition for a successful businessman in the New Mexico territory had seemed like divine providence. They had exchanged letters for months. Frederick Williams had described himself as a merchant with a fine home, seeking a sensible wife to help manage his household. Emma had been honest about herself, her modest upbringing, her skills at keeping house, her love of reading. She had even sent a small daguerreotype, though it was several years old and perhaps more flattering than accurate. When his proposal came, Emma had been elated. A new start in the West, away from the pitying glances of former friends who now viewed her as a charity case. She had spent her small inheritance on proper traveling clothes and the stage ticket, and now here she was, rejected and humiliated, with barely enough money to return east. What awaited her there? Perhaps a position as a governess or companion if she was fortunate. More likely, the grinding poverty of factory work. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. "Miss," a young voice called. "Miss Porter says if you're wanting a bath before supper, she can have one brought up now." The thought of washing away the dust of travel was too tempting to refuse. "Yes, please," Emma called back, rising to dig in her purse for a few additional coins. While waiting for the bath to be prepared, Emma unpacked her nightgown and a clean dress for tomorrow. Each item reminded her of her failed hopes, the modest blue dress she'd planned to wear as she established herself as Mrs. Williams, the lace collar she'd sewn to add a touch of elegance to her everyday wear. After her bath, Emma felt somewhat restored, though the hollow feeling in her chest remained. She dressed carefully for supper, arranging her light brown hair in a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Looking in the small mirror above the washstand, she studied her reflection critically. Was she truly so plain? Her features were regular enough: gray eyes perhaps too large for fashion, a straight nose, lips neither too thin nor too full. She wasn't beautiful, certainly, but was she so unattractive that a man would reject her sight unseen? Frederick Williams' cruel dismissal had cut deeper than she wanted to admit. The dining room was half full when Emma entered. She took a small table near the window, hoping to avoid conversation. The waiter brought her a plate of beef stew and fresh bread, and Emma realized she was ravenous despite her distress. As she ate, she couldn't help overhearing the conversations around her. The town was abuzz with news of cattle rustlers plaguing nearby ranches and the arrival of a new schoolteacher expected next month. Normal life continuing while Emma's had been upended completely. "Mind if I join you, madam? Place is filling up." Emma looked up to find a tall man standing beside her table, hat in hand. He was perhaps 30, with sun-browned skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes were dusty from the trail, but of good quality, a rancher or successful cowhand, she guessed. "Please," she said reflexively, gesturing to the empty chair across from her. "Jacob Kincaid," he said, settling his lanky frame into the chair. "Just in from the Double Circle Ranch north of here." "Emma Keller," she replied, offering the barest hint of a smile, "just passing through." Jacob nodded, seeming to sense her reluctance for conversation. When the waiter brought his meal, he focused on eating, occasionally glancing up at her with curious eyes. Emma finished her meal quickly, anxious to retreat to the privacy of her room. As she rose, Jacob stood as well, displaying the instinctive courtesy of a well-raised man. "Safe travels, Miss Keller," he said with a slight nod. "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid," she replied and hurried from the dining room. Sleep came fitfully that night. Emma tossed and turned, her mind replaying the humiliation of standing on the church steps in Santa Fe as Frederick Williams' business partner delivered the rejection message. "Mr. Williams regrets that you do not meet his expectations and has asked me to provide funds for your return journey," the man had said, his eyes avoiding hers as he handed over an envelope containing cash and the devastating note. Morning arrived with pale light filtering through thin curtains. Emma dressed and packed her things, preparing for the long journey back east. The stage wasn't due until afternoon, leaving her with hours to fill in a town where she knew no one. After a simple breakfast, Emma decided to visit the general store to purchase some provisions for the journey. The bell above the door jingled as she entered, and the shopkeeper looked up from his ledger. "Morning, miss. What can I help you with today?" "Just some traveling supplies," Emma replied, selecting a few items: crackers, dried fruit, a small bottle of lemon drops to ease the dust of travel. As the shopkeeper wrapped her purchases, the door opened again, bringing with it a blast of morning heat and the same cowboy from dinner the previous night. "Morning, Jacob," the shopkeeper called. "Got those nails you ordered?" "Much obliged, Tom," Jacob replied, then nodded politely to Emma. "Miss Keller." Emma returned the greeting, surprised he'd remembered her name after such a brief introduction. The shopkeeper raised an eyebrow. "You two acquainted?" "Shared a table at supper," Jacob explained, then turned to Emma. "You catching today's eastbound stage?" Emma nodded, accepting her wrapped package from the shopkeeper. "Yes, I'm returning to Boston. Something flickered across Jacob's face, curiosity, perhaps. Long journey, you have family there? No, Emma answered, then immediately regretted the admission. A woman alone with no family was too vulnerable a position to advertise. Jacob seemed about to say more when the door burst open and a wild-eyed young man rushed in. Mr. Kincaid, you're needed at the doctor's, quick. It's about Miss Lucy. Jacob's face drained of color. What's happened? The baby's coming early. Doc says there's trouble. Without another word, Jacob bolted from the store, leaving Emma and the shopkeeper staring after him. His sister, the shopkeeper explained, seeing Emma's confused expression. Widow with her first child on the way. Poor thing's been staying at the Kincaid ranch since her husband was killed in a mining accident last year. Emma nodded, feeling a pang of sympathy for the unknown woman and her brother's evident distress. She gathered her purchases and left the store, walking slowly back toward the hotel. With hours still to wait before the stage arrived, she decided to find a quiet spot to read. A small church garden caught her eye, its wooden benches shaded by cottonwood trees. Emma settled on one, opening the novel she'd brought for the journey. But concentration eluded her, her thoughts drifting between her uncertain future and the anxious face of Jacob Kincaid as he rushed to his sister's side. The morning stretched on, the town growing busier as people went about their business. Emma remained in the garden, reluctant to return to her hotel room but equally reluctant to explore the town further. The fewer people who noticed her, the better. As noon approached, Emma gathered her things and walked back to the hotel to collect her trunk. She was crossing the street when she noticed a commotion at the doctor's office. Jacob Kincaid emerged, his face ashen, supporting a sobbing older woman who could only be his mother. Emma quickened her pace, not wanting to intrude on their grief. Whatever had happened in that doctor's office was clearly devastating. Back at the hotel, she settled her bill and arranged for her trunk to be taken to the stagecoach office. With an hour still to wait, she ordered a light meal in the hotel dining room, though she had little appetite. She was just finishing when Jacob Kincaid appeared in the doorway, scanning the room until his eyes found her. He crossed to her table in long strides. "Miss Keller," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I apologize for the intrusion, but I heard you were leaving today, and I need to ask a tremendous favor." Emma set down her teacup, startled by the intensity in his eyes. "What kind of favor, Mr. Kincaid?" Jacob ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly struggling to compose himself. "My sister Lucy. She didn't survive the birth. The baby, a little girl, she's alive but needs constant care. Our ranch is 15 miles out and my mother—" His voice broke. "My mother is overwhelmed with grief. We need someone with knowledge of infants to help us get through these first days until we can make other arrangements." Emma stared at him in shock. "Mr. Kincaid, I'm very sorry for your loss, but I don't understand why you're asking me. I'm a stranger passing through town." "The doctor's wife mentioned seeing you in town yesterday, said you looked like a respectable Eastern lady. We're desperate, Miss Keller. There's no one else suitable in Redemption Creek who isn't already caring for their own family." "But I have no experience with infants," Emma protested. "And my stage leaves in less than an hour." Jacob's blue eyes held hers, filled with a mixture of grief and determination. "I can pay you well for your time, and there will be other stages east. Please, Miss Keller. This child has lost her mother before even knowing her. I can't bear for her to perish too." Emma felt trapped between compassion and self-preservation. To stay would delay her return, spend more of her dwindling funds, and entangle her with strangers in a place she never intended to remain. Yet the desperation in Jacob Kincaid's face was impossible to ignore. "3 days," she heard herself say. "I can stay 3 days to help you find a more permanent solution." Relief washed over Jacob's face. "Thank you. I'll compensate you fairly and provide transportation back to town for the next eastbound stage." Emma nodded, already wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. "I'll need to retrieve my trunk from the stage office." "I'll take care of it," Jacob assured her. The doctor has a buggy we can use to travel to the ranch. Can you be ready to leave in half an hour?" "Yes," Emma agreed, still stunned by the sudden change in her plans. Jacob thanked her again before hurrying away, leaving Emma to wonder what she'd gotten herself into. Helping a newborn orphan was certainly a worthy cause, but she knew nothing about caring for infants. What if she did more harm than good still? The alternative, refusing to help a motherless child, was unthinkable. Emma had lost her own mother, though she'd been grown when it happened. She couldn't turn her back on this family's tragedy. Half an hour later, Emma found herself seated beside Jacob in a borrowed buggy, her trunk secured in the back, heading out of Redemption Creek toward the Kincaid Ranch. Beside them, Jacob's mother cradled a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. The older woman's face was drawn with grief, tears occasionally slipping down her weathered cheeks. "Thank you for coming, Miss Keller," Mrs. Kincaid said softly. "Lucy would be grateful knowing her daughter is being cared for." Emma nodded, uncertain what to say. The enormity of the situation was beginning to sink in. A woman had died bringing new life into the world, and now Emma was being entrusted with that precious life, however temporarily. "What's her name?" Emma asked, looking at the sleeping infant. "Lucy didn't decide on one yet," Jacob answered, his voice tight. "She was considering naming her after our grandmother, Eleanor." "A beautiful name," Emma murmured. The journey to the ranch passed mostly in silence, each of them lost in their thoughts. Emma watched the landscape change as they traveled, the town giving way to open country dotted with scrubby trees and low hills. In the distance, she caught glimpses of cattle grazing on the sparse grass. Finally, they crested a rise and Jacob pointed ahead. "There it is, double circle." The ranch spread out below them, a large main house built of sturdy logs, several outbuildings, corrals, and a bunkhouse some distance away. It was larger and more prosperous looking than Emma had expected. "It's impressive," she said honestly. Jacob's face softened slightly. "My father built it from nothing. Started with just a few head of cattle and this land when no one else wanted it. By the time he passed 5 years ago, Double Circle was one of the most successful spreads in the territory." As they approached the house, several ranch hands paused in their work to watch them pass, removing their hats respectfully as they recognized Mrs. Kincaid and the bundle she carried. The main house was surprisingly comfortable inside, with solid furniture and touches of refinement Emma hadn't expected to find on a remote ranch. A housekeeper met them at the door, her eyes red from crying. "Everything's ready, Mrs. Kincaid," she said softly. "I've prepared Miss Lucy's old room for the baby and the guest room for." She glanced questioningly at Emma. "This is Miss Keller," Jacob explained. "She's kindly agreed to help us care for the baby for a few days." The housekeeper nodded gratefully. "I'm Martha, miss. I've got some experience with babies, but not newborns, and not one so tiny." "I'll help however I can," Emma said, though her confidence was faltering. The responsibility being placed on her shoulders felt enormous. Mrs. Kincaid gently passed the sleeping infant to Emma. "Let me show you to the nursery." Emma carefully cradled the tiny bundle, following Mrs. Kincaid up a wide staircase. The baby weighed almost nothing in her arms, her face barely visible among the soft blankets. The nursery had clearly been prepared with love. A cradle sat near the window, a rocking chair beside it. Tiny gowns and blankets were neatly folded in a chest of drawers. "Lucy was so looking forward to bringing her baby home," Mrs. Kincaid said, her voice breaking. "She finished embroidering that last blanket just yesterday morning." Emma's heart ached for the young mother who would never hold her child. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Mrs. Kincaid." The older woman nodded, tears filling her eyes again. "I should rest a while. Martha will bring you anything you need." She touched the baby's cheek gently before leaving the room. Left alone with the infant, Emma carefully settled into the rocking chair. The baby stirred, tiny hands flexing, and then her eyes opened dark blue and unfocused. A small sound, not quite a cry, escaped her lips. "Hello, little one," Emma whispered. "I'm sorry about your mama, but you're not alone." For the next few hours, Emma focused entirely on caring for the newborn. Martha brought bottles of milk the doctor had prepared, showing Emma how to feed the tiny infant. The baby took only a small amount before falling asleep again. By evening, Emma was exhausted but determined. The baby was struggling to take enough milk, and her tiny body seemed almost too fragile for this harsh world. When Jacob appeared in the doorway, concern etched on his face, Emma was walking the floor with the fussing infant. "How is she?" he asked quietly. "Restless," Emma answered. "And not eating well. I'm worried she's too weak." Jacob's face darkened with fear. "The doctor said the first days would be critical. She came too early." "We'll get through the night," Emma assured him, though she wasn't certain herself. "Has your mother rested?" "Some." This loss coming so soon after Lucy's husband. He trailed off, shaking his head. "It's too much grief for one family to bear." Emma nodded sympathetically. "You should rest too, Mr. Kincaid. I'll wake you if there's any change." Jacob hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave. "You're very kind to help us this way, Miss Keller. I know it's an imposition." "It's what anyone would do," Emma replied, though she knew that wasn't entirely true. Many would have continued on their journey, leaving this family to manage their crisis alone. After Jacob left, Emma settled back in the rocking chair with the baby. Through the long night, she dozed intermittently, waking to feed and comfort the infant every hour. By dawn, she was bleary-eyed with exhaustion, but the baby seemed slightly stronger, taking more milk with each feeding. Martha brought Emma breakfast on a tray and offered to watch the baby while she freshened up. Grateful for the respite, Emma went to the guest room where her trunk had been placed. She washed quickly and changed into a fresh dress, then returned to the nursery to find Jacob holding his niece, speaking to her in a low, gentle voice. "She seems stronger this morning," he said as Emma entered. "Yes, I think she's fighting," Emma agreed. "She took more milk at the last feeding." Relief crossed Jacob's face. "Thank God, I couldn't bear to lose her too." The day passed in a blur of feedings, diaper changes, and brief naps whenever the baby slept. Emma found herself talking constantly to the infant, telling her stories and assuring her that she was loved. Though her mother was gone, by evening, a routine of sorts had been established. Mrs. Kincaid would sit with the baby for short periods, though her grief often overwhelmed her. Martha helped prepare bottles and fresh linens. And Jacob appeared frequently throughout the day, his concern for his niece evident in every visit. As Emma rocked the baby that evening, Jacob appeared with a tray of supper. "You need to eat," he said, setting it beside her. "You've hardly left this room all day." "Thank you," Emma said, realizing she was indeed hungry. "Would you hold her while I eat?" Jacob carefully took the swaddled infant, his large hands surprisingly gentle. "Hello, little Alina," he said softly. "You're getting stronger, aren't you?" Emma smiled at the name. "You've decided to call her Alina then?" "It seems right," Jacob replied, his eyes on the baby's face. "Alina Lucy Kincaid." As Emma ate, she watched Jacob with his niece. Despite his grief, there was tenderness in his interaction with the baby that touched her heart. This man who had appeared so strong and capable in town now seemed vulnerable, his love for his sister's child written plainly on his face. "You're very good with her," Emma observed. Jacob looked up, a hint of a smile touching his lips for the first time since they'd met. "I helped with the ranch hands' children sometimes, never one so small though." "She's fortunate to have you," Emma said. "She's fortunate to have you," Jacob countered. "If you hadn't agreed to help us." He didn't finish the thought, but the gratitude in his eyes spoke volumes. The next morning brought improvement in baby Alina's condition. She took her feedings eagerly and cried with more strength, which Martha assured Emma was a good sign. "Lungs like her mother," the housekeeper said with a sad smile. "Miss Lucy had a set of pipes on her from the day she was born." Mrs. Kincaid seemed stronger as well, spending more time with her granddaughter and even managing to discuss practical matters with Jacob. "We'll need to find a wet nurse," she said as they gathered for a midday meal, the baby sleeping in a cradle nearby. "The doctor's formula is helping, but a growing baby needs mother's milk," Jacob nodded. I've sent word to the neighboring ranches. The Hendersons' daughter just had a baby last month. She might be willing to help or know someone who could. Emma listened quietly, reminded that her role here was temporary. In just 2 days, she'd grown attached to the tiny girl fighting so bravely for life. The thought of leaving her caused an unexpected pang. After lunch, Jacob invited Emma to step outside for some fresh air while his mother watched the baby. "You've been cooped up in that nursery for 2 days straight," he said. "A short walk might do you good." The October air was crisp but pleasant as they strolled around the ranch yard. Jacob pointed out various buildings and explained the workings of the cattle operation. Despite her urban upbringing, Emma found it fascinating. "And you've run all this since your father passed away?" she asked. Jacob nodded. "With my foreman, Pete." "Good man, been with the family since I was a boy." "It's impressive," Emma said sincerely. "You've built something remarkable here." "Thank you," Jacob replied, studying her with curious eyes. "May I ask you something, Miss Keller? What takes you back to Boston?" "You mentioned you have no family there." Emma hesitated, embarrassment flooding her at the thought of explaining her humiliating situation, but something in Jacob's direct gaze made her want to be honest. "I came west as a mail-order bride," she admitted, her cheeks warming. "But when I arrived in Santa Fe, the gentleman decided he didn't want to proceed with the marriage." Jacob's brow furrowed. "He rejected you, without even meeting you. He saw me from a distance as I arrived on the stage. Apparently, I wasn't what he expected." Emma tried to keep her voice light, but the hurt was still raw. "The man's a fool," Jacob said with unexpected vehemence. "What kind of person judges someone's worth on appearance alone?" Emma shrugged, touched by his indignation on her behalf. "It happens more often than you might think. I'm not. I've never been considered a beauty." Jacob stopped walking and turned to face her directly. "Miss Keller, in the past 2 days, I've watched you care for my niece with more tenderness and determination than many blood relatives would show. You've comforted my mother, respected our grief, and given up your own plans to help strangers in need. I don't know what that man in Santa Fe thought he saw, but he missed seeing who you truly are." Emma stood speechless, unprepared for the conviction in his voice or the warmth that spread through her at his words. Before she could respond, a ranch hand approached, breaking the moment. "Mr. Kincaid, rider coming in from town. Looks like Doc Adams." Jacob thanked the man and turned back to Emma. "We should head back to the house. The doctor promised to check on a leaner today." They walked back in companionable silence, Emma's mind replaying Jacob's words. No one had ever defended her so passionately before, certainly not a virtual stranger. The doctor's news was encouraging. Baby Alina was gaining strength, and while she remained delicate, he believed the worst danger had passed. "You've done well with her, Miss Keller," he said as he packed his medical bag. "She's a fighter, this little one." That evening, as Emma sat rocking Alina after her feeding, Jacob appeared with a letter in hand. "Word from the Henderson ranch," he said. "Their daughter can't leave her own infant, but she knows a young widow in town with a 3-month-old who might be willing to help. She could move into the ranch for a few months to nurse Alina alongside her own child." Emma nodded, feeling a complicated mix of relief and sadness. "That's wonderful news. When would she arrive?" "Day after tomorrow, if all goes well," Jacob replied, watching her face closely. "You've been planning to leave tomorrow, haven't you?" "Yes," Emma confirmed, though the thought brought no joy. "The eastbound stage comes through town at noon." Jacob was silent for a moment, seemingly wrestling with some internal debate. Finally, he spoke again. "Miss Keller, Emma, if I may, I know we've only known each other a short time, but I feel I must speak plainly. Would you consider staying on at Double Circle, at least for a while longer?" Emma's surprise must have shown on her face, for he continued quickly. "Not just for Alina's sake, though she's thriving under your care, but my mother has found comfort in your presence and I—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I believe you might find a place here if you wished it." "What sort of place, Mr. Kincaid?" Emma asked, her heart suddenly racing. "Jacob, please," he corrected gently, and I'm not entirely sure, as a companion to my mother perhaps, or as a teacher for Alina when she's older, or—" He hesitated, then finished quietly, "or something else entirely in time." The implication hung in the air between them. Emma looked down at the sleeping infant in her arms, then back to Jacob's earnest face. "I have nothing to offer," she said softly. "No dowry, no special skills beyond basic housekeeping. I'm just a plain woman with nowhere else to go." Jacob stepped closer, his expression intensifying. "You're anything but just anything, Emma Keller. You're kind and brave and stronger than you know, and you're not plain not to those with eyes to see." Emma felt tears gathering. No one had ever spoken to her this way with such genuine admiration. "I hardly know what to say." "Say you'll stay another week," Jacob suggested. "Give yourself time to consider what you truly want without the pressure of immediate decision. If after that time you still wish to return east, I'll personally ensure you have safe passage and funds for the journey." It was a generous offer, and one that appealed to Emma's practical nature. A week would give her time to think clearly, away from the emotional exhaustion of the past days. "All right," she agreed. "1 week." The relief on Jacob's face was evident. "Thank you." The next day brought a flurry of activity as the ranch prepared for a visit from neighboring ranchers coming to pay their respects to Mrs. Kincaid and meet baby Alina. Emma spent the morning helping Martha prepare refreshments while Mrs. Kincaid rested. "It's good to see this house coming back to life a bit," Martha commented as they worked. "After Miss Lucy's husband died, it was like a shadow fell over everything, now with the baby." She shook her head wonderingly. "And you've been a blessing too, Miss Keller." Emma smiled, touched by the older woman's words. "Everyone has been very kind to me." "Especially Mr. Jacob," Martha observed with a knowing look. "Never seen him take to someone so quick." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "He's grateful for the help with his niece, that's all." Martha made a noncommittal sound but said nothing more, leaving Emma to wonder if her growing feelings for Jacob were as transparent as they felt. By early afternoon, the first guests began to arrive. Emma stayed in the background, caring for Alina while Mrs. Kincaid received condolences and congratulations in equal measure. Jacob moved easily among the visitors, the responsible rancher in his element. Emma was changing Alina in the nursery when she overheard voices from the hallway, 2 women she didn't recognize. "Tragic about Lucy, of course, but that baby's a blessing," one said. "Though heaven knows how Jacob and his mother will manage a newborn with the ranch to run." "I heard they've brought in some woman to help," the other replied. "Eastern girl passing through town when Lucy died." "Is that her, the plain one I saw downstairs? Doesn't look like much, does she?" Mary said. "Jacob seems quite taken with her, though." "Wouldn't surprise me if he made her an offer. Man in his position needs a wife, especially now with a baby to raise." "Well, she'd be lucky to catch him. Double Circle's the most prosperous ranch in the county, and Jacob Kincaid could have his pick of women. Though I always thought he and Catherine Williams would make a match of it eventually." Their voices faded as they continued down the hall, leaving Emma frozen in place, Alina squirming in her hands. The women's casual cruelty stung, but worse was the implication that Jacob might see her as a convenient solution to his problems, an available woman to help raise his orphaned niece. The thought brought back all her insecurities. Was she setting herself up for another rejection? Jacob had been kind, even complimentary, but perhaps that was merely gratitude for her help during a crisis. Emma finished changing Alina and held her close, drawing comfort from the baby's warmth. Whatever happened, she would protect her heart this time. No more allowing herself to be vulnerable to rejection. When she returned downstairs with Alina, the gathering was in full swing. Jacob immediately crossed the room to her side. "There you are," he said warmly. "Everyone's eager to meet this little one." For the next hour, Emma stood beside Jacob as neighbors cooed over baby Alina. She noticed several young women eyeing Jacob appreciatively, including a striking blonde who approached them with confident grace. "Jacob," the woman said warmly, embracing him, "I'm so sorry about Lucy." She was always so kind to me." "Thank you, Catherine," Jacob replied. "Lucy thought highly of you too." Catherine turned her attention to Alina, exclaiming over her tiny features. "She has Lucy's chin, don't you think? And your father's eyes, perhaps." Emma felt acutely aware of her own outsider status as Catherine and Jacob reminisced about shared memories of Lucy. This woman clearly had history with the Kincaid family, and the easy affection between her and Jacob was unmistakable. "And who is this?" Catherine asked finally, turning her bright smile on Emma. "Emma Keller," Jacob introduced her. "Miss Keller has been a godsend, helping care for Alina these past days." "How fortunate she happened to be passing through," Catherine remarked, her smile never wavering though her eyes assessed Emma keenly. "Will you be staying long at Double Circle, Miss Keller?" Before Emma could answer, Jacob spoke. "Miss Keller has agreed to stay on for the time being. We're grateful for her presence." Catherine's perfect eyebrows rose slightly, but she merely nodded. "How nice. Well, I should greet your mother. Excuse me." As Catherine moved away, Emma found herself wondering about the woman's relationship with Jacob. The conversation she'd overheard suggested many expected them to marry eventually. "Catherine's father owns the Southern Cross Ranch," Jacob explained, seemingly reading her thoughts. "Our families have been friends for generations." "She seems very fond of you," Emma observed carefully. A shadow crossed Jacob's face. "Catherine and I grew up together. There was a time when our fathers hoped we might join the ranches through marriage, but..." He hesitated. "Catherine deserves someone who loves her completely. I couldn't offer that." Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Kincaid approached, looking tired but composed. "Jacob, dear, would you bring Alina to meet Judge Wilson? He's about to leave and hasn't seen her yet." As Jacob moved away with the baby, Emma slipped outside for a breath of fresh air. The afternoon sun was warm on her face as she settled on a bench in the garden, grateful for a moment alone to gather her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" Emma looked up to find Catherine Williams standing before her, elegantly dressed in a blue gown that matched her eyes perfectly. "Of course," Emma replied, shifting to make room on the bench. Catherine sat with practiced grace. "I wanted a private word with you, Miss Keller." Emma steeled herself, expecting hostility from the beautiful woman who clearly held a special place in Jacob's life. "Yes." "I've known Jacob Kincaid since we were children," Catherine began, her voice surprisingly gentle. "He's one of the finest men I've ever known, honorable to a fault, loyal to those he cares for, and utterly incapable of disguising his feelings." Emma remained silent, uncertain where this was leading. "The way he looks at you," Catherine continued, "he never looked at me that way, though heaven knows I once wished he would." "I'm sure you're mistaken," Emma protested. "Mr. Kincaid is merely grateful for my help with Alina." Catherine laughed softly. "My dear Miss Keller, gratitude doesn't make a man's eyes follow a woman across a room as if she were the only person present. Jacob has always been kind to everyone, but he reserves that particular look for you alone." Emma felt her cheeks warm. "We've only known each other a few days." "Sometimes a few days is all it takes," Catherine replied with a hint of wistfulness. "I just wanted you to know that Jacob deserves happiness. He's carried so much responsibility since his father died, and now with Lucy gone." She shook her head. "If you care for him, don't let your doubts stand in the way." With that, Catherine rose and returned to the house, leaving Emma stunned by the unexpected conversation. The gathering continued for another hour before guests began to depart. By evening, only family remained, all of them exhausted from the emotional day. Emma took Alina upstairs for her feeding, grateful for the quiet of the nursery after the busy afternoon. Jacob found her there later, gently rocking the sleeping baby. "You were wonderful today," he said softly from the doorway. "Everyone commented on how natural you are with Alina." Emma smiled tiredly. "She makes it easy. She's such a good baby." "May I?" Jacob crossed to take the infant from her arms, carefully transferring Alina to her cradle. He stood watching his niece for a moment, then turned back to Emma. "Would you walk with me? The sunset is beautiful and you've been indoors all day. Emma hesitated, then nodded. For a few minutes, I should be nearby in case Alina wakes. They walked in silence to a small rise behind the main house. The setting sun painted the landscape in gold and crimson, the distant mountains purple against the fiery sky. I've always loved this view, Jacob said, his voice quiet in the evening stillness. My father used to say God painted his best pictures in the western sky. Emma nodded, the beauty before them almost overwhelming after days spent indoors. It's magnificent, Emma, Jacob said, turning to face her. I need to speak plainly. These past days have been filled with grief and joy mixed together, losing Lucy, gaining Alina. Through it all, your presence has been like finding water in the desert. Emma's heart quickened at his words, but doubt still lingered. Jacob, you hardly know me. I know enough, he replied steadily. I know you're kind and brave. I know you put others' needs before your own. I know watching you with Alina makes me think of a future I never dared imagine before. What kind of future? Emma asked, barely above a whisper. Jacob took her hands in his blue eyes earnest in the fading light. One where Alina grows up with a mother who chose her, even knowing she wasn't her own by birth. One where this ranch becomes a true home again, filled with family and perhaps, in time, more children. One where I wake each morning beside a woman I respect and admire more with each passing day. Emma felt tears gathering. Jacob, I'm not Catherine Williams. I'm not beautiful or accomplished. I'm just your Emma Keller, he interrupted gently. And you're exactly who I want if you'll have me. But what will people say? Those women today, I don't give a damn what anyone says, Jacob said with sudden fierceness. I've spent my life doing what was expected, taking over the ranch when my father died, supporting my mother and sister, being the responsible one. For once, I'm choosing what I want, not what others think I should want. He released one of her hands to touch her cheek gently. I'm not asking for an answer now. Take the week as we agreed. Get to know me, get to know Double Circle. But know this, whatever you decide, you will always be welcome here. Emma nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Jacob smiled softly, then bent to brush his lips against her forehead, a gesture of respect as much as affection. We should get back, he said. Alina will be hungry soon. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. The wet nurse, a quiet young widow named Sarah, arrived with her infant son and settled into a room near the nursery. Though Emma was no longer solely responsible for Alina's care, she found herself spending most of her time with the baby, falling more deeply in love with the tiny girl with each passing day. Jacob was often busy with ranch business, but he made time each evening to sit with Emma, gradually sharing stories of his childhood, his dreams for Double Circle's future, and his hopes for Alina. In turn, Emma told him about her life in Boston, her parents, and the circumstances that had led her to become a mail-order bride. I can't believe anyone would reject you, Jacob said one evening as they sat on the porch after supper. His loss is my very good fortune, but still, the man must be blind. Emma smiled, growing more comfortable with Jacob's compliments. Perhaps he did me a favor. If he hadn't sent me away, I would never have stopped in Redemption Creek. Then I owe him my thanks, Jacob replied, his hand finding hers in the gathering darkness. On the 5th day of Emma's stay, a letter arrived from Santa Fe. Emma recognized Frederick Williams' handwriting on the envelope and felt a chill of dread as Jacob handed it to her. It came with the mail from town, he explained. Addressed to you, care of the hotel in Redemption Creek. They forwarded it here. Emma stared at the envelope, then slowly opened it, aware of Jacob's concerned gaze. Dear Miss Keller, she read aloud, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I write to express my sincere regret for the manner in which our arrangement was terminated. Upon reflection, I realize my behavior was unconscionable. Business associates have rightly criticized my actions, and I find myself reconsidering my hasty judgment. If you have not yet departed the territory, I would welcome the opportunity to meet properly and perhaps reconsider our understanding. I remain, Frederick Williams. Emma looked up from the letter to find Jacob watching her, his expression carefully neutral. "He's changed his mind," she said, a hint of disbelief in her voice. "And what do you think of that?" Jacob asked quietly. Emma considered the letter again, searching for any feeling beyond mild surprise. There was no flutter of hope, no desire to accept the second chance being offered. Instead, she felt only gratitude that Frederick Williams' rejection had led her to Redemption Creek, to Double Circle, to Jacob and Alina. "I think," she said slowly, "that Mr. Williams still sees me as a business arrangement to be negotiated, and I believe I deserve better than that." The tension visibly drained from Jacob's shoulders. "You deserve the world, Emma Keller." Emma folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket, a chapter of her life now firmly closed. "I don't need the world, just a place where I'm valued for who I am, not what I look like or what I can provide." "You have that here," Jacob said, his voice low and earnest. "With me, with Alina, with all of us at Double Circle." Emma met his gaze, seeing the sincerity there. "I know." That evening after supper, Emma sat in the parlor with Mrs. Kincaid, working on mending while Jacob reviewed ranch accounts at a nearby desk. The domesticity of the scene struck Emma how quickly she had found a place within this household, how natural it felt to be here. Mrs. Kincaid set aside her embroidery with a sigh. "I believe I'll retire early tonight. These old bones need their rest." Jacob rose to help his mother to her feet. "Good night, Mother. I'll check on Alina before I turn in." "Good night, dear. Good night, Emma." Mrs. Kincaid paused by Emma's chair, resting a hand briefly on her shoulder. "I'm so glad you're here with us." After Mrs. Kincaid departed, Jacob returned to the parlor, but instead of resuming his work, he sat beside Emma on the settee. "Tomorrow marks a week since you agreed to stay," he said quietly. "Have you given thought to what comes next?" Emma set aside her mending, her heart racing. "I have. And I find I don't want to leave," she admitted. "Alina has my heart completely, and Double Circle already feels more like home than anywhere I've lived since my parents died." Hope brightened Jacob's face. "And what about me, Emma? Have I any place in your considerations?" Emma met his gaze steadily. "The largest place of all. I never expected to find someone like you, Jacob. Someone who sees me, truly sees me, and values what he sees." Jacob took her hands in his. "I more than value what I see, Emma. I love what I see. I love you." The words hung in the air between them, simple and profound. Emma felt tears gathering in her eyes, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "It seems impossible that it could happen so quickly, but I do." Jacob's smile was radiant. "Then stay. Not as Alina's nurse or my mother's companion, but as my wife. Marry me, Emma. People will talk," Emma warned, though her heart was already answering yes. "They'll say you married me out of convenience to have someone care for Alina." "Let them talk," Jacob replied firmly. "We'll know the truth. And in time, they'll see it too that I married the most remarkable woman I've ever known because I couldn't imagine living another day without her." Emma's last doubts melted away. "Yes, Jacob, I'll marry you." Jacob gathered her into his arms, his kiss gentle but filled with promise. When they parted, Emma rested her head against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible a week earlier. "When?" Jacob asked, his voice husky with emotion. "Soon," Emma replied. "I don't want a long engagement, just a simple ceremony with your mother and Alina present," Jacob nodded. "Next Sunday, the minister comes to town then. We could be married after services." "Perfect," Emma agreed. The days leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparation. News of their engagement spread quickly through the county, generating plenty of gossip but also many genuine congratulations. Mrs. Kincaid was visibly delighted, embracing Emma as a daughter and helping her prepare for the ceremony. On the morning of their wedding day, Emma stood in her room at Double Circle, wearing the best dress she'd brought West, a simple blue gown that Mrs. Kincaid had helped alter to fit better. It wasn't a proper wedding dress, but Emma didn't mind. The day's significance lay not in finery but in the promises to be made. A knock at the door preceded Martha, carrying a small box. "This just came from Mr. Jacob. He asked me to bring it to you." Emma opened the box to find a delicate silver locket on a fine chain. Inside was a tiny portrait of Alina, her small face peaceful in sleep. A note in Jacob's strong handwriting read, "For the mother of my heart's daughter, all my love, Jacob." Tears sprang to Emma's eyes as Martha helped her fasten the locket around her neck. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "He's a good man," Martha said, patting Emma's shoulder, "and you're good for him, for all of us here." The ride to town was peaceful, the October morning crisp and clear. Jacob kept glancing at Emma, his eyes filled with a joy that matched her own. Mrs. Kincaid held Alina, now thriving under the care of her loving family. The small church in Redemption Creek was crowded when they arrived, word of the wedding having brought out most of the town's residents. Emma felt a moment of nervousness as curious eyes turned to her, but Jacob's hand found hers, steadying her. "Ready?" he asked softly. Emma nodded. "More than ready." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. As they exchanged vows, Emma looked into Jacob's eyes and saw her future there bright and filled with promise. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Jacob kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. As they turned to face the congregation, Jacob's arms secure around her waist, a whisper ran through the crowd. Emma caught fragments so quick and convenient arrangement and felt herself tense. Jacob must have felt it too, for he suddenly stopped their progress down the aisle. "Friends," he said, his voice carrying to the back of the church, "I want to thank you all for sharing this day with us, and I want to say something about my bride." Emma looked up at him in surprise as he continued. "Some of you may wonder at the speed of our courtship. Others may have your own ideas about why I've married Emma Keller, so let me make it plain." His arm tightened around her. "I married this woman because from the moment she stepped into our lives, she has been nothing short of a treasure. When others saw only tragedy, she saw a child to love. When I was lost in grief, she showed me a path forward. She is kind, brave, and beautiful in ways that matter." He turned to face Emma directly, his voice softening but still audible to all. "You are the treasure I never knew I was seeking, Emma Kincaid. And I will spend the rest of my days grateful that you chose to share your life with me and with Alina." Emma's heart overflowed with love as Jacob bent to kiss her again, sealing his public declaration. As they continued down the aisle, the whispers had changed to murmurs of approval, and even a few sniffles from more sentimental members of the congregation. Outside, they were met with congratulations and well wishes. Even Catherine Williams approached with genuine warmth, embracing Emma and whispering, "I told you he had eyes only for you." The celebration continued at the town's small hotel, where Jacob had arranged a modest reception. As the afternoon wore on, Emma found a quiet moment to slip outside for some air, Alina sleeping peacefully in her arms. Jacob found her there, gazing out at the distant mountains. "Happy, Mrs. Kincaid?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, careful not to disturb the baby. "Completely," Emma replied, leaning back against his solid strength. "I never imagined finding this kind of happiness when I started west. Nor I when I asked a stranger to help with a newborn," Jacob admitted. "God works in mysterious ways." Emma turned in his arms to face him. "Frederick Williams did me the greatest favor of my life when he declared me too plain to marry. He set me on the path that led to you." Jacob shook his head, his expression serious. "You've never been plain, Emma, not to eyes that see truly. You're extraordinary in every way that matters." He bent to kiss her, and as Alina stirred between them, Emma felt the perfect rightness of this moment, this family they had formed from loss and chance and love. 1 year later, Emma stood on the porch of Double Circle Ranch, watching as Jacob rode in from checking the herd. Alina, now a sturdy toddler with Lucy's dark curls and Jacob's blue eyes, squirmed in her arms, eager to greet her father. "Papa," she called, reaching out her small hands as Jacob dismounted. Jacob's face lit with joy as he bounded up the steps to sweep his daughter into a hug. "There's my girl." He kissed Alina's cheek, then turned to Emma with equal devotion, greeting her with a tender kiss. "And there's my beautiful wife." Emma smiled, still warmed by Jacob's unfailing admiration after a year of marriage. "Supper's almost ready. Your mother's made apple pie for dessert." Jacob kept one arm around her as they entered the house, Alina chattering happily between them. The home that had once been shadowed by grief now rang with laughter and love. In the nursery upstairs, a cradle waited for the child Emma carried beneath her heart, a sibling for Alina, due to arrive with the spring. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Alina asleep inside under Mrs. Kincaid's watchful eye, Jacob pulled Emma close against his side. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he posed occasionally as if still amazed by his good fortune. Emma shook her head, placing his hand over the gentle swell of their growing child. "Not one. Every step of my journey led me exactly where I was meant to be," Jacob's fingers laced with hers. "When I think how close we came to never meeting if you hadn't been in Redemption Creek that day, if you'd continued east." "But I was, and I didn't," Emma reminded him. "Some things are meant to be." As darkness fell over Double Circle Ranch, Emma Kincaid counted her blessings: a husband who treasured her for exactly who she was, a daughter who had captured her heart from the first moment, a child growing beneath her heart, and a home filled with love. From rejection had come redemption, from loss had come love, and from being deemed too plain had come the discovery that true beauty lies in being seen and valued for one's heart. Jacob drew her closer, his lips finding hers in the gathering darkness. "I love you, Emma Kincaid," he whispered against her mouth, "my treasure now and always." "And I love you," Emma replied, her heart full, "now and always." Their love, born in grief and nurtured through kindness, had blossomed into something precious and enduring, a treasure neither of them had expected to find, yet one they would cherish all their days.